Class 2, Bonus Class 2, and I got a question from one of our students, from Elio, about ethics and whether we need to memorize all of the content. So what I suggest you do is you memorize the names of the standards. So you've got the 7 standards of professional conduct, okay, just so you know what each one refers to. So we've got professionalism, okay, for example, and then we've got loyalty to professionalism, and then loyalty to clients, loyalty to employers, okay. So just have a good idea of the titles, because sometimes in a question they will say, according to standard 3A, da, 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 and they don't put the name in, so you don't know that it refers to customers or clients, okay. And then the other thing is you need to understand the scenarios. So you don't need to memorize anything, really, but you need to have a good feel for what's right and what's wrong. And you get the feel for it by reading the scenarios and by doing practice questions. So sometimes in ethics, usually in ethics, there isn't a right and a wrong answer. There is a best answer or worst answer. So what is the best for, in a situation, what is the best option, or what is the most compliant course of action? So for example, you might have an analyst. It's quite common to get questions where they talk about the travel expenses of an analyst. So for example, an analyst could be flying to see a company, and if the company is easy to get to by commercial transportation, then the analyst should not expect the company to reimburse him or her for his travel expenses, okay, because it could bias him or her when they write their opinion about the company. If, however, there is no commercial transportation available to this company and they have to commission a private jet or something, then it's okay for the company to pay, because the analyst doesn't really have another feasible option. So you need to read the scenarios to understand what's okay and what's not okay. And in the exam, you will be given scenarios. The exam questions are little scenarios, and you have to say what the best course of action is in accordance with the ethics standards of professional conduct.
Like the example that the book gives us, right?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. So instead of learning or trying to learn them, just do lots of practice questions. So read the scenarios and do practice questions, and do both of those things. Or, you know, the more practice questions you do, the better you will get at ethics, because you will start to understand what the best course of action is, what a breach of the ethical codes is in a particular situation. Okay, and basically the same situations come up all the time. So travel expenses is going to come up, gifts are going to probably come up. You know, I mean, I can't say it will definitely come up, but these are common questions, common scenarios. So when you're looking in the book, in the CFA book, all of those scenarios could be tested. You're likely to see similar scenarios in the exam. They'll change the names of the people and change a bit the scenario, but basically it's the same thing. It's to do with travel expenses, or it's to do with professionalism in the workplace, or it's to do with your loyalty to your customers, or, you know, so just make sure you read these scenarios, understand why the behavior should be how it is, understand what the correct behavior is according to the code of standards and the code of ethics and the standards of professional conduct, and make sure you do practice questions to test that you really understand what the ethical requirements are, basically. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, cool, good. All right, so today I've just prepared some slides which are just a kind of summary of some things just for new students, but about SHP. So who are we? So we focus on providing training for internationally recognised qualifications, and we're also certified by ACCA, CFC, and we work in partnership with BPP, okay, which is a provider of professional education materials. We have small classes, okay, and we have highly qualified tutors. We've got proven methodology, international materials, and flexible learning options. So we have live, online, face-to-face, and in-company courses. Okay. Some pictures from our last classes. Okay, so you can see what the classroom looks like. The two top photos are in our classroom at SHP. The bottom left one is at INSPA and the bottom right one is at Mackenzie. And so we've got around 20 tutors, okay? And our tutors are kind of coaches. So you get a lot of individual attention. We focus on making sure you get your questions answered, that you're able to study effectively. We give you all of the help you need. But ultimately, it will be you who will pass this exam. You need to sit the exam. You need to study for it. So we offer everything we can to help you to prepare. But ultimately, it's really down to you to put the effort in, which, as you know, the exam is difficult. The CFA exam is difficult, so it really does require dedication. Okay, but we make it as easy for you as we possibly can. Okay. As well as helping with the actual exam preparation, we offer networking and access to job opportunities. And then we also have events with local and international speakers. Okay, so stay tuned. All right. Now, I'm just including this slide here about why the CFA program, because obviously for you to really put the effort into the studying that's required, you have to have a good idea and all the time of why you're doing it. And I think it will help if you just keep reminding yourself how good this qualification is. It is life-changing. Okay. Why? Because it's going to give you expertise, okay, which is valued by the market. It's going to give you recognition, okay, because it's so widely known and it's regarded as the gold standard. Okay, it's going to give you a good ethical grounding. So as a result of studying all of those scenarios, when you find yourself in a particular ethical scenario or problem, you don't know what to do, you can refer to the ethical standards and you should have a good idea of what the appropriate course of action is. Why is that important? Because your work as an investment professional requires you to have credibility, okay, and that comes from acting in an ethical way. The entire valuation profession, the investment profession, is built on trust, okay? Investors won't invest if they don't trust you, basically. Okay, why else? You will become part of a global community. Okay, so there are CFA charter holders all around the world. There are 10,000 CFA charter holders in the UK. Okay, in Brazil we have around 1,000. Okay, it's growing very, very fast. Okay, the growth rate in Brazil in terms of CFA members is one of the fastest growth rates globally. Okay, and we just had the annual conference. Damodaran came to the conference, valuation guru. And he spoke to a crowded auditorium at Itaú. Okay, so really very good for networking. And then employer demand. Okay, so some of the biggest banks around the world, biggest asset managers, recruit CFA charter holders. It is a differential which should help you in the career marketplace, job marketplace. Okay, so looking at what you will learn. Okay, you're already getting familiar with level 1. Okay, level 1 gives you investment tools, okay, basically. So the tools you need for analysis, so an understanding of financial reporting and analysis, an understanding of quantitative methods, an understanding of products, so what is equity, what is fixed income, what are derivatives, what is private equity, etc. Okay, at level 2 we focus on asset valuation, where we go deeper into valuation of each different product, so equity, fixed income, derivatives, and alternatives. And then at level 3 we look at portfolio management, and this is where we have a written paper. Okay, the morning paper is a written paper. You need to reply to 11 or 12 questions in a written format. Okay, so that's sometimes a bit challenging for people. We offer courses to help, okay, that focus on exam technique for people who find that exam difficult. Okay. All right, and we have these 10 topics which appear in each exam. Okay, so ethics, number 1. This is always a large, around 15% component of each exam. Okay, it's really very important. And we've got quants and economics, financial reporting and analysis, and corporate finance. Okay, so those are all tools that will help you with your analysis. And then we have equity, fixed income, derivatives, and alternatives. In alternatives, we've got private equity, hedge funds, commodities, real estate, and infrastructure. And then portfolio management and wealth planning, where we bring everything together. Okay, we look at risk and return of portfolios. We look at giving advice to individual investors and institutional investors. Okay, so there's a lot of content here, which is really, it's really going to help you professionally. Okay, so moving on, and please interrupt me if you have any questions, okay? Moving on, so looking at the methodology, okay? I have updated this to put 350 hours here, okay? The average successful candidate, according to CFA, spends around 300 hours preparing for the exam, okay? Sometimes people need to spend significantly longer than that, okay? So I would view that as the absolute minimum amount of time you need to spend preparing, okay? This exam really is a marathon, okay? So the people who get through it are the people who really study hard, consistently, put the effort and time in. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, as they're going to test factual knowledge, they're going to test your ability to apply formulas, they're going to test your understanding of concepts, and the only way to get that is through studying. Okay? And you need to focus on the right things, which we focus on the core concepts in class. So if you had a completely thorough understanding of all the concepts we cover in class, you would probably pass the exam, okay? But there is also additional factual reading, which will help you to get a few extra marks. And even with the core concepts we cover in class, it's likely that you might not get all of the answers correct to those core concept questions. So the more you can read more broadly in the curriculum, the more likely you are to pass the exam, which is why we are focusing on this pre-course reading now, okay? It's going to give you the extra marks, hopefully, that you need in order to get through the exam. So there's pre-course reading right now. The more you can do now, the easier it will be for you once the classes start, okay? Because then you can focus on the core concepts, okay? So we've got classroom and revision course, which is 100 hours starting in January. Pre-course reading. Originally, so we put 25 to 50 hours, okay? So the more you can do, the better, I would say, okay? So a budget for 25 to 50 hours in your study plan. Extra study time once the course starts up until the end of April. This is home study, around 100 hours. And then we've got a revision time allowance, which is 100 hours in May. Okay, so that's the month before the exam. So May, you should plan to spend around 100 hours at home studying and take some time off work if you can. So I took the week off work before each exam, and it was critical. Often the week before makes the difference between passing and failing the exam, because in that final week, you've got a real adrenaline rush and you really push through, and that's when most people do practice exams that week. So this is the consolidation phase, the final consolidation, which enables you to recall the knowledge quickly because you've got used to doing practice exams, okay? It's absolutely critical that you do this consolidation, okay, through doing practice exams, and usually people end up doing that in the final week. If you can do it in the month before, that would be great, but most people end up doing it in the final week, okay? So I would strongly recommend you take that time off work. Okay, so our methodology, we've got learning, which is in the teaching phase of the course, and also the pre-course reading that you're doing now. And we've got practicing, okay, and we've got our revision. The revision phase of the course focuses on practicing. So we go over the material, the most important concepts, for a second time, and then we do lots and lots of practice questions in class. Okay, and you should also be doing practice questions at home. We do practice questions as part of the learning phase as well. Okay, so you read, do some practice questions to make sure you've understood what you're reading. Okay, then we do more practice questions as part of the practicing phase, and then consolidation through mock exams. Okay, that's where what you're doing there is recalling knowledge under timed conditions. So the key thing is under timed conditions. Okay. All right, so we've got the Getting Started class, which we already had. Okay, the recording is available still. That was in a class we had in September. And then 5 free bonus classes. We're on the second of the 5 free bonus classes on the pre-course reading. Okay. Then we've got learning, and we've got 21 classes for learning starting in January. Practicing, we have 7 classes, that's the revision phase. And then consolidation, we have 9 hours of exams under timed conditions as part of the course, and 2 exam debrief classes. And you'll also get individual exam results reports telling you what to focus on, where your weak areas are. Okay. So we've got 100 hours in the course, and then you're going to need to make up this difference here. You're going to need to study for 250 hours at home, okay? So we're going to help you, but you do need to put the time in. All right, any questions on this?
No.
No? Good. Okay. All right, so just a little recap. We've got the core subjects, which are covered in the classroom course. So these are the subjects that are absolutely critical to an understanding of the investment profession, okay? So conceptual material, capital asset pricing model, yield to maturity, net present value and IRR, elasticity, LIFO, last in, first out, and FIFO, first in, first out. All of these concepts are core. There are other core concepts as well, okay? These are just some examples. These are the ones we focus on in the course, okay? And then we have non-core subjects, okay? These are the ones that are set as home study reading, okay? Most of this home study reading is set as the pre-course reading. There is still some home study readings that will be set once the course starts, okay? But most of this is pre-course reading. And as I said, the more you do now of this pre-course reading, the more time you will have to focus on the core concepts once the class starts, which will be critical to your exam success. You want to have plenty of time to focus on really understanding these core concepts, okay? And as it says here, these factual ideas or factual subjects are less frequently examined than the core subjects, but the exam will have a significant number of questions from these topics, okay, which means you will pick up extra marks if you are aware of these non-core subjects, okay? And the questions could be quite easy. They might be just questions that require you to remember the types of auction markets, for example. That's in Okay, so the level 1 exam itself, okay, here we've got the weights of each topic in the exam, and today we're going to look at quants, which is 12% of the exam, and financial reporting, which is 20% of the exam. Okay, in the last class we looked at ethics, which is 15% of the exam. Just as a reminder, the exam will be on the 2nd of June, which seems like a long way from now, but the time will pass quickly, it always does. Okay? And if you look at the amount of studying you've got to do and calculate how you're going to spread this 250 hours of home study out across the next few months, you'll find out that you really, unless you want to have a lot of studying to do closer to the exam, it will really make your life easier if you can start studying now, okay, as I know many of you are doing, okay, because distributed study, so study that's spread out over time, is going to be easier, it's more manageable, because instead of studying for 8 hours a week, you'll only need to study for 4 or 5, you know, or whatever. You need to work out your own plan to work out how many hours you'll need to do and when. Okay. All right, so you've got 2 3-hour exams, okay, on the day, 120 freestanding, that means independently marked, multiple choice questions, okay, each with 3 possible answers. The topics are all examined in each paper. So the morning paper, you will have all of the topics, and in the afternoon paper, they will always be in the same order. You can choose the order you want to answer them in. I would answer your strongest areas first. Majority of the questions are not numerical. You need to understand concepts. Okay, this is a real challenge. Okay, it really is quite tough, this exam, in a way. I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted, per se. It's a challenge. Okay, but this is a good thing because it's going to make you into a first-class, top-class investment professional. Okay. And then pass mark. So it's not publicised, but aiming for around 70% in the exam, the practice exams, should give you a reasonable certainty that you will pass the exam. Okay. The pass rate, as in the percentage of people who pass, is around 40% globally. Okay, and it's approximately the same in Brazil. So that means 60% of people fail the exam. Okay, so my priority is to make sure you are in the 40% of people who pass. Okay, and I'm sure that's your priority too. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay. If you have questions, yeah, just interrupt or chat or put something in the chat. Okay. So here is the study plan. A reminder of the study plan. You will need to make some sacrifices. Starting early, studying more is going to give you a higher chance of success. So from now until April, we've got the teaching phase or learning. Okay, so that's the first time you read the material. Then in May, we've got the revision phase. We're going to go over the material again. And then we have consolidation through practice exams. Okay. This is a bit small to read. You can zoom in if you want to, but basically it's all of the components of your studies. So we've got the getting started class. Okay, we've got the course itself. We've got your home study, your study on the pre-course reading, etc., etc., etc. Okay. And underneath, we've got the hours you need to dedicate to each component. So 100 hours in class, 25 to 50 hours in home study, etc. Okay. So make a plan, figure out how much time you're going to spend each week studying. Okay. So you see the big picture, you break it down into little bite size or small, digestible chunks. Okay. So this exam is about a marathon. It's about being organised. It's about breaking the studying down, getting on with the study, doing practice questions, focusing on the right things, testing yourself. Okay. So you need to be good at studying. You need to learn how to be a good student as well as part of this process. Okay. And we will be giving you all the tips we can. Okay. So these are the study materials you've got, or you will get. So you've got the CFA program curriculum, okay, which everyone has, either the ebooks or the printed version. If you have ebooks, you can download them onto your phone if you're not already aware of that through the Vital Source bookshelf, it's called. So that could be quite useful. You will get around 2,000 of slides, printed slides, during the course, okay, so once we start. And that will cover the most highly examined topics, which are the core topics in the exam, and how they are examined. So practice questions will be included. Okay. Then you get a book of practice exams from BPP, 3 full practice exams. Okay, this is good for you to do at home as part of the consolidation phase. They're very good practice exams. Okay, they're quite hard, but that is a good thing because it will mean you're prepared. We start sending out study guides on each topic area once the course starts. Okay, and they are an overview of each topic. Okay, and then we've got in the teaching phase, you've got question banks, additional question banks, 2, one for teaching phase 1, one for teaching phase 2. We split the teaching phase into two, and you have a halfway there mock exam, practice exam, covering the first phase in the middle of the teaching phase, if you see what I mean. So after phase 1, you have a practice exam, then we do phase 2. Then you have a full practice exam with all of the content. Okay. And then in the revision phase, you get another question bank. Okay. You also get the halfway there, which is the partial mock exam or practice exam, and the final one. Okay. So in total, you're going to have access to 5 practice exams, 3 from BPP, 1 from SHP, and another one which is provided free by CFA Institute in return for your enrollment in the exam. So they provide an additional practice exam for you, which usually you get access to. Well, I don't think you have access to it yet. It's usually a couple of months before the exam, I think, that you get access to it. Okay, and it's online. Okay, so a little overview of the bonus classes. Okay. So we already had class 1 on the 30th of September, and we looked then at the Getting Started guide, which I sent to you all by email. That's a PDF with guidance on pre-course reading, exam enrollment, using your calculator, study tips, etc. Okay, and then there's a study plan, which is the Excel spreadsheet that I sent to everyone, and that's got a breakdown, a list of all of the readings and space for you to tick once you've done the reading. Okay. It also tells you which readings are critical, which readings are high priority, which readings are medium, so it gives you the priorities of each reading. It tells you which questions to practice as a high priority from each reading. Okay. So there's some really useful information in that. And then ethics. So ethics is study session 1 of the CFA curriculum, 15% of the exam. Okay. And as we discussed last time, it might help you to break up your ethics studying by doing some quants, some FRA, and some ethics at the same time. So what you could do is every time you sit down to study, do 30 minutes of ethics. Okay. The key thing is to make sure you're actively learning and you're not just reading without really absorbing the information. And ethics can be a little bit dry, dry means kind of boring. It's not boring if you bring it to life in your head. Depends how you read, okay? But you could end up in the situation where you're just reading without absorbing what you're reading. So breaking up your studying can help you, okay? So doing 30 minutes or even 15 minutes of ethics every time you sit down to study could really help you to absorb it better, okay? And that actually applies to other topics as well. If you're finding financial reporting is really, you're taking a long time to go through the readings, which is highly possible, then what you might do is decide, right, I'm going to do 45 minutes of FRA, and then I'm going to have a little break, and then I'm going to do some quants, and then I'm going to come back to FRA. Okay. So mixing up the subjects when you study is often a more effective way to learn. Okay, because we don't get bored, or we're more focused. Okay, and setting yourself targets. Like, I have 45 minutes to read this section, and I'm going to focus on the learning outcome statements, and I'm going to be actively reading to understand the learning outcome statements. So give yourself 45 minutes, make it a bit of a race for yourself, okay, a race against time for yourself, and you can always say to yourself, I'll come back to it if I don't manage to read everything, that's fine. So you say 45 minutes, I'm going to try to make sure I've understood these learning outcome statements in 45 minutes, okay, I'm going to skim and scan for useful information, skim just to see what's in the material, okay? So skimming is when you read material and you get the key points. Scanning is where you're looking for specific information. So you're doing a combination of those two things when you're reading the material. You're scanning for information that's relevant to the learning outcome statements, and you're skimming to get a sense of the whole material, okay? So it could be that your most effective way to learn is skim first. So just flick through the pages, which is why it's nice to have the printed books. Flick through the pages, look at the headings. Okay, so what have we got here? Just trying to get an overall vision, an overall view of what's in the material. So you go, all right, these are the headings, these are the main things I need to know about. I have no idea what that means at the moment, but it doesn't matter, right? What you're doing is getting an overview. You're seeing how many pages you have to read as well. Okay, so you get that overview first. How many pages do you have to read? What are the key contents? Okay. Then look at the learning outcome statements, and that's when you need to start scanning for the information that's relevant to the learning outcome statements. Okay. So guys, just to get some feedback from you, how are you finding the readings so far? I'll ask you in a few minutes. Think about it. I'm going to come back to that when we look at technique for reading. Okay. So just to finish off here, we're on the 21st of October class. So we have 3 more classes, okay, in November, December, and January, okay, covering the topics here. Where can you get this information? In the study plan. So refer to the study plan for this information. Okay. I'm not going to write that. Right, so refer to the study plan. And then on the 30th of January is when we start the course. Okay. The study plan also tells you the readings that need to be done. Okay, so this is from the study plan. Okay, it's just highlighting the readings. So we've got the study session the reading is from, the reading number, the importance of the reading, the title, suggested number of hours in total on the reading, and then the minimum amount of reading for pre-course reading. Okay, now it's going to be a bit difficult to read partially one of these readings. Okay, so why is the time allowance less? The time allowance for the pre-course reading less than the full time allowance? Because we're going to come back to some of these readings. Okay, you're going to spend more time on these readings later, some of them. Okay, not all of them, but some of them we will come back to in the course or in the revision, in the teaching or the revision phase. Okay, and there's also going to be a bit of time spent on them through doing practice exams. Okay, because the practice exams will have a bit of content from these readings, and you might go back to the reading if you're not sure about a particular concept. Okay. You can see here which readings are covered in which class. Okay, so last time we looked at the ethics readings, and we had readings 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we just gave an overview. So watch the recording if you haven't already. Okay, and then here today in class 2, we're just going to look quickly at quants and financial reporting and analysis. Okay. And there's some stuff underneath this table, just saying we will support you with any questions you have. Okay, so far I haven't received any questions. So it would be nice if you can send me some questions, just so I know that you're on track, you're reading. You know, having questions is a sign that you're working with the material. Okay, so it's normal to have questions. And also that will help. You can say, what do you want me to put into the classes? Because if you have a question, I will cover it in the class. So there are some things that I would expect you probably to have questions on regarding quants and financial reporting and analysis as a result of your reading. So if you can just make sure for future classes, and even today, you can tell me what your questions are, and then I will incorporate answers to help you into the bonus classes. Okay, this is what's going to help you. Okay, so anything you don't understand very well, just tell me, and I will include some material on it in the bonus in the free classes. Okay, and we will have a quiz on the that's a little test on the pre-course reading in the first class. Okay, once the course starts on the 30th of January. Okay, so approach to the reading. Review the learning outcome statements and then go through the reading. This is where you're scanning. You do not need to read everything, just focus on achieving the learning outcome statements. Okay. Answer the questions at the end of the reading within 24 hours. Why? Because if you don't do that, there is a risk that you will forget what you have read. Okay, surprisingly. It's quite possible to read something and completely forget about it if you don't test your knowledge. Then mark the questions you got wrong so you can go back to them later. Now, it might be that you go back to them once the course has started, or in the revision phase, or even when you're practicing exams in the consolidation phase. But the point is, if you don't mark the questions you got wrong, highlight them, then you're never going to know you're not going to be able to go back to them because you won't know which questions you got wrong. Okay, so it's actually very important to mark the questions you got wrong so you can go back to them. Okay, and here we've got an example of learning outcomes. So, guys, over to you. How are you finding getting through the reading? Are you finding it difficult, easy? What is your technique?
So I find it quite straightforward, not easy or hard, but I mean, it's a lot of stuff, a lot of content. But at least I'm used to reading in English, which makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, well, that's that challenge too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But in the end, it's the amount of content and the deepness of the details that makes it hard. So that's the question I asked you in the beginning, how deep on details the test will be, and you said that they won't be on the details, like you won't need to read.
Yeah, so, yeah. This is where step 3 is critical, okay? So this is where you're testing that you understood enough from the reading to get the questions right. Because in order to judge if you have spent enough time on a reading, the only way is to test yourself. And the only way to test yourself is to do the practice questions.
Yeah.
So when you did the practice questions, or have you got them right? Are you getting them right?
Yeah, I've been trying hard to make all of them right. But I've been going back. So every time that I start reading a new chapter, I run through the questions of the previous chapters so I can kind of reinforce all the knowledge gathered in the past and then move forward. So I've been basically, now I'm kind of remembering every question that I've answered in the past, which makes it not as effective as it was like some weeks ago. But anyway, it's working. So
you're answering, so when you sit down to study, you're going through the previous readings. You're doing the questions relating to the previous studying you did.
Every single time.
Okay, and so once you read something new, do you do practice questions on it immediately?
Yes.
Or do you wait?
Yes.
You do that as well?
Yeah, I start by doing the questions related to the past chapters. Then I move towards the new chapter. By the end of this new chapter, I do questions and stop for a while. When I come back, I do questions for all the chapters and then start the new chapter. And that's how I'm trying to kind of anchor the knowledge I've been gathering.
Okay. All right. So a couple of things on that.
Are you getting... Now I know all the answers.
Oh, good. So are you getting the questions right?
Yeah, now I can get all the questions right because now I've kind of memorized the answers. I know that in the first, the sequence is like B, C, C, D, D, C, D. So it's not really working out anymore. But it's a good way to remember in the end. At least I read all the questions. And
you understand why the answer is what it is?
Yes, and that's why I asked you the questions on, do I need to memorize all the terms and all the small details, or is it just a broader type of analysis and conclusion regarding a situation? Because if that's the thing, I'm pretty sure that I've been covering the content the way I should do it.
Well, if you are getting the answers to the questions correct, then you must be doing the right thing.
Yes, that's happening.
Yeah. And I mean, it depends. So some of the material you need, if you look at the learning outcome statement, they tell you what you need to be able to do. Okay. So we'll look at the learning outcome statements for the quants and the FRA readings, because they tell you what you need to learn, basically, what you need to be able to do, and then you can test that you are actually able to do that by doing the practice questions. Okay. So sometimes you do need to learn things. Okay. So I mean, with ethics, I would say learn what's in those shaded boxes below each ethical standard. Have you seen the boxes that are shaded? They tell you what, yeah. So learn those, or at least read them a few times, because that's, if you have a question and you're not sure of the answer, if you can remember what's in that box, it will help you. Okay, so I would recommend learning that, actually. Learn shaded boxes, okay, for ethics. It doesn't mean, though, when we say learn, it doesn't mean you have to be able to literally write out every single word that's in there. You just need to know what's in there, you know, what are the key concepts. Okay. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. All right, so... And then regarding the answering questions from previous material, that's a really good idea, because then you're going to be recalling, okay? The more you recall information, the more you recall concepts and facts and data, the more likely you are going to be able to recall it quickly in the exam. So good, that's a really ideal way to study, okay? Is to do some practice questions. So sometimes I say to students, if they're struggling with ethics, to do, you know, we were saying about doing maybe 15 minutes of ethics every time you study. Include practice questions in that time, in the 15 minutes. So you keep doing practice questions on ethics. So it becomes part of your way of thinking. It's changing the way you think, actually, the study of ethics. You start to think in a different way, which is interesting. So with ethics, it's not like a mathematical formula or whatever. You learn a mathematical formula. With ethics, you're actually learning a behavior. So you're learning a way of thinking, which could be quite different from your current way of thinking. Okay, it probably is, because some of the ethical principles are things that we don't really think about other than when we're taught them. So they are principles that we need to remember when we are deciding on a course of action, what to do, behavior. Okay, so really the way to learn that is by understanding the scenarios, repetition, making it almost part of your life, and which is why always returning to ethics, such as study ethics, can really help you be more effective in your study. Okay. Any other comments on approach to the readings? I think it's really good for you guys to share your ideas, because everyone is different. So my way of reading, I'm quite detailed, so for me it's very difficult to skim. I find I get stuck in the detail. So for me to make sure I don't get stuck in the detail too much, it helps for me to do what I just was explaining before about looking at how many pages I've got to read, looking at all of the headings, looking at the learning outcome statements, and just being very focused and giving myself a time limit for the reading. So that really helps me to make sure I don't spend too long on each reading. Because the thing is that you have, and this is why the study plan is so important, you have a limited amount of time for these readings. If you spend the next 3 months reading the accounting, financial reporting readings, that means there is going to be a sacrifice in terms of the other readings you could do, right? So once the course starts, at least, you're going to have to be very focused in making sure you move on. So you need to complete reading assignments before each class. You have to, otherwise you will not keep up with the course, okay? And so you need to move on. If you have not managed to do something in the time allowed, you have to move on to the next subject. Okay, so you need to be quite disciplined with that, and just apply the 80%, an 80% rule. So make sure you've read 80% of the reading. You're comfortable with the learning outcome statements. You do not need to read every single thing. Okay. No one gets 100% in this exam. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on and just do a little overview, very simple overview of the quant readings. Okay, so quant is 12% of the exam. Okay, there are 2 study sessions out of the 18 study sessions that are in the CFA curriculum. So 2 of them are on quant. That's 8 readings in total. Okay. 2 of the readings were set for home study. These 2 here. Okay. And in the course, we have 2 3-hour classes in the teaching phase of the course. We've got the exam debrief, where we debrief quant questions, and then we've got a revision class on quant 2. So quite a lot of time on quants in the course. Why is quant so important? It's one of the tools for analysis. Okay, we need quantitative methods in order to value equity, fixed income, derivatives, and alternatives. Okay, quant is extremely important in finance. Okay, now we have 2 readings which are critical, and these readings were set for home study. Okay, we will return to these readings. Okay, so the home study hours, the minimum is only 2 hours. Right, in total. That is not enough to read everything, okay? These are the total numbers we suggest you spend in your entire preparation on these readings, okay? So the 2 hours is just to give an overview for you to get an idea about what the readings are about, okay? We will return to them in the course because they are critical, okay? So really what I wanted you to focus on here, would like you to do, is focus on using your calculator, make sure you're comfortable with the idea of time value of money and discounted cash flows, okay? But as I said, we will come back to this, okay? So it is time to move on if you don't spend too long on it, okay? So we've got time value of money, discounted cash flow applications, okay? We've got statistical concepts here, probability concepts, probability distributions, sampling and estimation, hypothesis testing, and technical analysis. So the hypothesis testing, sampling and estimation, probability distributions, you might have covered some statistics at school or at university, but basically we're looking at normal distributions and working out the probability of outcomes in the tails generally. Okay, so what we could look at here is the probability of a big loss in the tail of the distribution. Okay, and so we're looking at maybe what's the loss with a 5% probability in the tail, for example. Okay, it's difficult to write on this laptop, I'm afraid. But so 5% here. Okay. All right, but we cover that extensively in class. Okay, because it's very important for your understanding. It's one of the core concepts, the sampling and hypothesis testing for the exam, okay? People often get quite confused with it. So it's not set as home study because it's better for us to cover this once we start the course, okay? So I don't know how you guys got on with the quants readings. What I did here is I've just listed the learning outcome statements. So time value of money. Can you interpret interest rates as required rates of return, discount rates, or opportunity costs? Okay, ask yourself, okay, do you know what a rate of return is? Do you know what a discount rate is? Do you know what an opportunity cost is? That's all defined in the chapter, okay? So focus your learning on the definitions of those terms, okay? Do you know what the risk-free rate is, real risk-free rate? Do you know what premiums are, okay? Do you know how to calculate the effective annual rate? This is another area that's often confusing for people. We will cover this in the course also, okay? Time value of money problems for different frequencies of compounding. This is where you will do calculations doing compounding over quarterly periods or semi-annual periods or weekly or daily, okay, or continuous compounding periods. Okay? You need to know what the future value is of something, the present value, okay? Okay, what is an ordinary annuity? What is an annuity due? Okay, so I'm asking more questions than I'm answering, okay, because this should have been covered in your pre-course reading, okay? And this is how you test yourself. So you look at those learning outcome statements and you actively analyze whether you are able to reply to them, whether you have mastered them. Okay, so be honest with yourself. Can I really explain an interest rate as the sum of a real risk rate, a free rate, and premiums? What are they talking about here? Okay, if you can't answer the questions, if you aren't able to achieve these outcomes, you need to go back into the reading, okay? And how do you test that you've really understood what they want you to understand? Do practice questions. Okay. So we've got the time value of money. We've got discounted cash flow applications. An area that students often struggle with is holding period returns here, okay? So we cover that in the course as well. We also look at NPVs and IRRs and compare the use of each of those because that's another core concept for the exam, okay? These things are home studies, okay? Money-weighted and time-weighted returns. So money-weighted is an IRR. Time-weighted is using the holding period returns. Okay? So if you've understood holding period return and IRR, you will be okay with this bit, with D. Okay? Very important concept for finance. Any comments on the quants?
No.
No? Are there areas that you studied before?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so good. So previous studies will really help you with this. If it is completely new, it is going to be challenging because it's a new way of thinking. Okay, many people who have got a quantitative background, so if you studied finance or business administration, even I think that would have some parts of quants in it. Okay, if you studied those topics at university, it's going to be much easier for you to study this now. If it's new, it's going to take you some time. Okay, so again, you've got to understand whether you personally need to spend more time on these particular readings. So this is where really analysing your study plan and looking at the topics you're more familiar with already is going to help you, okay, because you need to adjust it to make sure it works for you. Okay, so financial reporting and analysis. I think this is an area where most people are going to need to spend more time, because although I think a lot of you have studied discounting before, you understand the concept of time value of money and how to calculate a discounted cash flow, you probably don't understand too much about accounting, okay, about debits and credits. We don't really talk about debits and credits in the CFA program, but you need to know that every accounting transaction has two impacts, two effects, and you need to know what they could be. So you need to know that if a company receives money from its customers, that will increase its cash and reduce its accounts receivable from customers. So you need to know that that's that's what happens. Because in order to interpret financial statements, you need to know what effect a transaction has on them. Okay, so the basics are covered in the pre-course reading, and those will give you a fundamental understanding of how financial statements work. So this is 20% of the exam. It's got the highest weighting of all of the subjects in the exam. And why is FRA so important? Because as an investment professional, you will need to interpret financial statements. Okay? You'll need to calculate ratios on them. You need to understand if the company is doing well, if it's got problems, if it's got a cash issue, if it's got solvency issue, if it's profitable, where is it profitable? Is it profitable on its gross margin, okay, or is it profitable on its net profit margin? Is it profitable in just converting cost of goods sold into and selling the product? Does it have lots of administrative expenses which are affecting its operating profit margin? So you need to understand the different levels of analysis of profitability, for example, okay, but you know, you're going to spend a lot of time actually on this reading here later in the course. This is financial analysis techniques, okay, it's the fourth. There are only four critical readings in the curriculum, okay. The two of them are the quants ones on time value of money and discounted cash flow applications. One is reading 3 on ethics, and the other is financial analysis techniques, this one here, which is ratio analysis, basically. Okay. So in class, we look at that in detail, and we do lots of practice questions. So there are 4 study sessions on financial reporting and analysis, as you can see here, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, that is a total of 13 readings. 3 readings were set for home study, these ones here. This is the minimum amount of time required for home study. And then we do 5 classes in the teaching phase of the course on financial reporting, plus there is the exam debrief, plus there is a revision class, okay? So we will be coming back to this. The readings for home study was on, it's reading study session 6, financial reporting and analysis and introduction, okay? So looking at the headings of the study session, we've got an introduction, then we've got income statements, balance sheets, and cash flow statements, okay? Then in the third study session, we've got inventories, long-lived assets, income taxes, and non-current liabilities. And then in the fourth one, we've got financial reporting quality and financial statement analysis, okay? Looking at how much we can rely on the financial reporting of a company. Okay, so the readings for home study were financial statement analysis and introduction, financial reporting mechanics, and financial reporting standards. Okay, so very introductory readings. Okay, so you are not expected to be an accountant. Okay. You need to analyze accounts. What do we mean by analyze? You need to understand how they work, which is where you need to understand the impact of a transaction on the financial statements. You need to know key ratios, which we will cover in that ratio analysis chapter. Okay. You need to know the impact of accounting policies on the comparability of accounts. So it could be that one set of financial statements you're looking at was prepared under a certain accounting policies, and another was prepared under different accounting policies. And you need to know the impact of that and how to make adjustments if necessary. Okay. So analyze and make adjustments here. In the CFA curriculum, there is quite a lot of repetition and overlap. Okay? So in the course, what we have done is we have made the material all follow a logical order, so there's no duplication. Okay? So you will find as you're going through the readings that there is a bit of repetition. Okay, just for you to be aware. Okay. So not sure how your reading so far has gone. Okay, but financial statement analysis and introduction. Okay, so basically you need to know what a statement of financial position is, what a statement of comprehensive income is, statement of changes in equity, and statement of changes in cash flow. Okay, so you need to know what they are. This first one is a bit, roles of financial reporting and financial statement analysis. Okay, financial reporting, presenting the financial reporting information. Analysis, analyzing it in order to get meaning from it. Financial statement notes. So you need to know what's in the notes. For example, a set of financial statements has these statements themselves, which is in B. It also has notes, which give you more explanatory information, and that is very useful for analysts because you can get additional information from those notes that you can't see on the face of the financial statements, the first page, the summary. Okay. For example, fixed assets, tangible fixed assets. They have lots of information about depreciation, and you can work out useful information about the age of the equipment the company is using, etc. Okay, so it's pretty good. Then we have audits. Okay, so as an investment professional, you might want to check the audit report to make sure that the financial statements are okay and you can trust them. Okay, and then information sources, the steps in the financial statement analysis framework. Okay, maybe there'll be a question on this. These are less core. Okay. Financial reporting mechanics. So this is where you are going to start to understand the accounting equation and the impact of transactions on the financial statements. So for anyone who is new to accountancy, this is going to be quite challenging, okay, but it's fundamentally important. It's really important for you to understand the accounting equation, which is assets are equal to liabilities plus equity, okay? You've got a balance sheet, you've got assets on one side of the balance sheet, and on the other side, you've got liabilities and equity, and they must be equal. So assets are equal to liabilities plus equity. And when you're looking at the impact on the financial statements of every transaction, it has two effects. The assets must always be equal to liabilities plus equity. So in the example that I just gave, if you have an increase in cash because a customer has paid, your cash increases, but your accounts receivable decreases, right? So what is the impact on the asset side of the balance sheet? That's the question. So if your cash increases by 100 and your accounts receivable decreases by 100, what is the impact on assets in total? So what's plus 100 of cash minus 100 of accounts receivable? It's not a trick question. What's the net effect? What's 100 minus 100?
0.
0. Good. So the net effect is 0 on the asset side of the balance sheet, okay? Which means our accounting equation still works, still balances. Assets are still equal to liabilities plus equity. Okay, because we increased our cash, we decreased our accounts receivable. Both of those are asset balances. So the change is just a reclassification. The effect on total assets is 0, which means assets are still equal to liabilities plus equity. Now, if you don't understand that, you need to read this chapter. Okay, it is critical. I can't even say how critical that you understand that. Okay, this is the absolute foundation of financial statements, which is going to be 20% of your exam. Okay, so critical importance that you understand the accounting equation. That is the most important thing out of all of this. We will go through it in class again, okay, but if you can get a head start, it will help you. Okay. Basically, everything else that's in here is based on this accounting equation. Okay. If you want me to go back to this, come back to this in another class, let me know, okay. Okay, and so the final reading that was on financial reporting for home study was reading 23, financial reporting standards. Okay, so this is just about understanding how financial reporting standards are set. Really, it's very factual. We are not going to come back to this in the course. Okay, it's factual reading for you to understand the standard setting process and global convergence. That's between US GAAP and IFRS. So US GAAP, generally accepted accounting procedures, and IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, have had a project to work on converging financial reporting standards. So in some cases that is working, in some cases not so much. Okay, so it's just about being aware really of what's happening, of how financial reporting standards are set. Okay, but you know, this is not really very core, and it's good to know. It might get you maybe one mark maybe in the exam. Okay, but it's not something we're going to come back to in the course. So that was kind of a whistle-stop, very fast overview of the, I haven't described it, right, it's more stuff about accounting standard setting. Something that is important here actually is this conceptual framework, okay? That's the conceptual framework for financial reporting. It's really more important for accountants in some ways, but it is the theoretical principles on which a set of accounts is based. Okay, so it is things like the information in the financial statements has to be relevant. Okay, if it's not relevant, don't include it because it's not important for decision making. It also has to faithfully represent the reality of the company. Why is that important? Because it has to not have errors or mistakes. It has to be a true, faithful representation of the reality of the company. Okay, which makes sense as well. It's not going to be very useful to users of the financial statements if the information in them can't be relied on. Okay, so faithful representation is another key or fundamental component of the conceptual framework. So those really are that's the most important thing I would say. Okay, so any questions that I can help with? Anything you would like me to do next time? You don't have to tell me now. You can send a message in the WhatsApp group or an email, just if there's anything specifically you would like me to go over in the next classes or class. And remembering that let's go back to the reading for next time. I don't mind going back to things if you want me to, okay? The important thing is to make sure you're progressing and learning, okay? So for the next class on the 18th of November, okay, we have corporate finance and portfolio management, okay, corporate governance and environmental, social and governmental factors and introduction, portfolio management and overview, risk management and introduction. Okay, so yeah, just those 3 readings next time. So if you want me to go through any technical information or anything from today's class that has been raised as an issue, then let me know, okay, so we can make these classes as useful for you as possible. Part of the objective of the classes is to just make sure you are doing the pre-course reading, to give you some structure, I suppose, to your studying, okay? So I mean, really, congratulations, actually, on even just joining this class or watching it, the recording, because it means you're thinking already about your studies. And I've seen many times students leave everything to the last minute and then don't pass the exam because, you know, they've not studied enough. So really, you're in a good position already by already starting to think about this, starting to study. Very good. So any questions before we finish?
No.
No? Was that useful?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
The slides help a lot. The idea
Yeah.
of having the core concepts to kind of focus on helps a lot.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I will do this next time then, give you an overview. Maybe, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Anything else?
No. Thank you so much, Susan.
All right, you're very welcome, okay? And keep in touch, all right? Oh, I'm seeing a message now. Portfolio return measurement, really hard to understand how to apply equations using HP12C. Okay. So, yeah, so for the HP12C, we actually, in the first class of the course, we're going to go through calculator technique, okay? So I will give you a head start on that maybe in the next class, okay? João Paulo, if you can tell me, oh, sorry, his question didn't appear. So I think The question is using HP12C for portfolio return questions. So in the next class, I will do a holding period return question, okay? And if you can tell me specifically the problem you're having with the HP12C, I will answer that question as well, okay? All right. Okay, guys, so have a very nice weekend, all right? And keep in touch.
You too, Susan.
Thank you, will do. All right, see you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.